I cannot thank you enough for the love and sympathy you have shown our whole family.
King Charles has finally ended the silence, and his announcement stunned the entire world. He confirmed heartbreaking news about baby number 4, admitting, "This is something I never wanted to reveal." The mood shifted instantly. Fans expected joy, but instead they received a shocking truth that sent waves across the royal circle. Even palace insiders say they have never seen the king this shaken. And now the biggest question across every screen, every home, and every headline is the same. What went wrong behind the palace doors? The stunning announcement. King Charles has always been a man of careful words and measured responses. Throughout his decades in public life, he has mastered the art of saying much while revealing little. But on a crisp autumn morning in late October of 2025, something changed. The king sat down in his private study at Clarence House, surrounded by portraits of his ancestors and the weight of centuries of royal tradition, and made a decision that would alter the course of British royal history forever. He decided to tell the truth about a secret that had haunted him for over 4 decades. The announcement came not through the usual channels of palace press releases or carefully choreographed television interviews. Instead, Charles chose a more personal approach. He invited a small group of trusted journalists to Clarence House, just 5 individuals who had covered the royal family with discretion and fairness over the years. There were no cameras, no recording devices, just notebooks and the king's own voice as he shared what he described as the most difficult truth of his life. What Charles revealed in that room sent shockwaves through every corner of the United Kingdom and beyond. He confirmed the existence of a 4th child, a baby born in the early 1980s during the most turbulent period of his marriage to Princess Diana. This was not another child from his relationship with Camilla, as some had speculated over the years. Why now? That question hung in the air of every newsroom, every palace corridor, and every British household as the story began to break. Charles himself addressed this directly. At 77 years old, having battled recent health concerns that the palace had only partially disclosed to the public, the king felt the urgency of mortality pressing upon him. But there were other factors at play beyond the king's personal conscience. Palace insiders had been whispering for months about a potential exposé, a journalist who had allegedly uncovered documents that proved the existence of this hidden royal child. The timing of the announcement also coincided with a period of relative stability for the royal family. Prince William and Catherine had successfully navigated their own challenges earlier in the year, and the public's affection for the Wales family remained strong. Harry and Meghan were living quietly in California, their Netflix deals and tell-all interviews seemingly behind them. The Commonwealth was preparing for a major summit in early 2026, and Charles wanted this revelation addressed before such a significant gathering. The reaction from Buckingham Palace staff was mixed. Some longtime employees wept openly, having served the family through decades of secrets and silence. Others expressed quiet relief that the truth was finally emerging. The younger members of the royal household, those who had joined in recent years, struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had been hidden for so long. One junior press officer was overheard saying that everything they thought they knew about the family had been built on foundations of sand. As news of the announcement spread beyond the small circle of journalists in Clarence House, the world began to process what this meant for the monarchy, for the line of succession, and for every member of the royal family touched by this decades-old secret. The hidden 4th child. The identity of this 4th child is perhaps the most heartbreaking element of King Charles's revelation. Her name is Charlotte Anne, though she has never used her royal connection or claimed any title. Born on March 15, 1983, in a private London clinic far from the public eye, Charlotte came into the world during one of the darkest periods of Charles and Diana's marriage. She is not Charles's biological daughter, but rather Diana's child from a brief relationship that occurred during a particularly painful separation from the prince. The circumstances of Charlotte's birth are as complex as they are tragic. In early 1982, Diana was struggling with the overwhelming pressure of royal life. She had already given birth to William in June of the previous year, and the cracks in her marriage to Charles were beginning to show. The prince was still emotionally attached to Camilla Parker Bowles, leaving Diana feeling isolated, lonely, and desperately unhappy. During a 2-month period when Charles was traveling extensively for royal duties, Diana formed a connection with someone who offered her the kindness and attention she craved. Diana confided in only 2 people initially, her sister Sarah and a trusted lady-in-waiting who has since passed away. The idea of divorce was discussed, but in 1982, such a scandal would have shattered the monarchy. The Queen Mother was still alive and wielding considerable influence, and the institution's priority was preservation at any cost. Charles learned of Diana's pregnancy in late summer of 1982. According to his recent confession, his initial reaction was anger and betrayal, despite his own ongoing emotional affair with Camilla. But as the weeks passed and he watched Diana's anguish, something shifted in him. He made a decision that he described as both the most selfless and most cowardly act of his life. He agreed to claim the child as his own if Diana would agree to give the baby up for adoption immediately after birth. The adoption was handled through a private agency with deep connections to the Church of England. The adoptive parents were a couple in their late 30s, unable to have children of their own, who lived in the countryside of Norfolk. They were told only that the baby's mother was young and from a prominent family, nothing more. They named her Charlotte Ann, never knowing that the middle name had been Diana's desperate attempt to maintain some connection to her lost daughter, as Anne was Diana's own middle name. Why the family kept this secret for so long is a question with multiple answers, each more complicated than the last. The most obvious reason was the preservation of the monarchy itself. In 1983, the public image of Charles and Diana was crucial to the royal family's standing. They were supposed to represent the perfect marriage, the fairy tale union that gave hope to millions. The truth about Diana's child would have destroyed that image and potentially triggered a constitutional crisis about the line of succession. But there were deeper, more personal reasons for the silence. Diana herself demanded that the secret be kept, not out of shame, but out of a desperate desire to protect her daughter from the cruel spotlight of royal life. She had already seen how the press hounded her every move, how every moment of her life was dissected and analyzed. She could not bear the thought of subjecting an innocent child to that same torture, especially a child whose very existence would mark her as a scandal. Charles kept the secret initially out of a sense of duty to the crown, but over the years his reasons evolved. He grew to respect Diana's wish to protect the child, and he also carried immense guilt about the entire situation. In his recent statement, he admitted that forcing Diana to give up her baby was something he could never forgive himself for, regardless of the circumstances. He described watching Diana's grief in the months and years that followed as the most painful experience of his life. Diana carried the secret until her death in 1997, though those close to her said the loss of Charlotte haunted her every day. She would sometimes disappear into fits of sadness that no one could explain, particularly around March 15th each year. Her later work with disadvantaged children and her passionate advocacy for young people took on new meaning in light of this revelation. Diana was, in a sense, trying to mother every child who wanted her because she could not mother the one she had been forced to give away. Charlotte herself grew up completely unaware of her true origins. She had a happy childhood in Norfolk, attended local schools, and lived an ordinary life. She married in her 20s, had 3 children of her own, and worked as a primary school teacher. It was not until August of 2025 that she learned the truth about who she really was, when King Charles's private secretary arrived at her home with documents, photographs, and a letter from the king himself. Diana's knowledge and heartbreak. Princess Diana carried the weight of losing Charlotte Ann every single day from March 15, 1983, until her tragic death on August 31, 1997. Those 14 years were marked by a grief so profound that it colored every aspect of her life, every decision she made, and every relationship she formed. The Queen was informed of the situation by Charles himself in September of 1982. Her reaction, according to later accounts from palace insiders, was cold pragmatism mixed with disappointment. She did not rage or condemn Diana, but rather immediately began calculating how to protect the monarchy from scandal. The Queen Mother, when she learned the truth, was far less measured in her response. She reportedly called Diana careless and foolish, though she ultimately supported the adoption plan as the only viable solution. But it was Diana's conversations with a handful of trusted friends that revealed the true depth of her heartbreak. In 1992, during the period when her marriage to Charles was publicly collapsing, Diana opened up to her voice coach, a woman who had become one of her closest confidants. She described the moment they took Charlotte away as the moment her heart stopped beating properly. She said she could still feel the weight of her daughter in her arms, still smell that unique scent of newborn skin, still see those tiny fingers that had briefly wrapped around her own. Diana told her friend that she had wanted to name the baby Charlotte after her grandmother and Anne after her own middle name. When the adoptive parents happened to choose those exact names, Diana saw it as a sign from God that her daughter would somehow always be connected to her. She kept a small silver locket with a lock of Charlotte's hair inside, the only physical reminder she had been allowed to keep. She wore that locket hidden beneath her clothes almost every day, touching it whenever she felt overwhelmed by grief or loneliness. In 1995, Diana gave her famous Panorama interview with Martin Bashir, in which she spoke about there being 3 people in her marriage. What the world did not know was that during the preparation for that interview, Diana had seriously considered revealing the truth about Charlotte. She had even drafted sections of what she would say, how she would explain the impossible position she had been placed in as a young mother, but ultimately her desire to protect her daughter from the media storm outweighed her need to tell her own truth. Diana's butler, Paul Burrell, later revealed that the princess kept a secret diary separate from her other journals. In this hidden diary, she wrote letters to Charlotte on every birthday and every Mother's Day. She described what William and Harry were doing, what kind of mother she was trying to be, and how she hoped that wherever Charlotte was, she was loved and happy. Diana wrote about her regrets, her what-ifs, and her fantasies of somehow finding her daughter and bringing her home. The loss of Charlotte fundamentally changed how Diana approached motherhood with William and Harry. She became fiercely protective of her sons, determined that they would grow up knowing love and affection even within the cold walls of palace life. She broke royal protocol constantly to hug them, kiss them, and be emotionally present in ways that previous generations of royals never had been. Friends observed that Diana seemed to be mothering for 4 children, not 2, pouring all the love she could not give Charlotte into her sons. Diana's humanitarian work, particularly with children, took on new significance in light of her hidden grief. Her visits to homeless shelters, her advocacy for children affected by AIDS, her campaign against landmines that executed and maimed young people, all of it was driven in part by a mother's love that had nowhere to go. She would hold sick children with a tenderness that made nurses weep, and she would spend extra time with young people who had lost their parents, understanding the pain of separation in ways others could not. In her final years, Diana had apparently hired a private investigator to try to locate Charlotte. She did not want to disrupt her daughter's life, but she desperately wanted to know that the girl was happy, healthy, and loved. The investigator had made some progress by the summer of 1997, having narrowed the search to 3 families in Norfolk. Diana planned to wait until Charlotte was 18 before attempting any contact, believing that an adult would be better equipped to handle such shocking news. But Diana never got that chance. On that terrible night in Paris, as her car sped through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel pursued by paparazzi, Diana was carrying that silver locket with Charlotte's hair. She was also carrying a letter she had written to her daughter, explaining everything and expressing a mother's eternal love. That letter, along with other personal effects, was initially kept by French authorities and later returned to the palace, where it remained sealed until Charles's recent decision to reveal the truth. Those closest to Diana have said that her final years were marked by a particular kind of sadness that went beyond her failed marriage or her struggles with the royal family. It was the sadness of a mother who had been forced to choose between her child and her duty, and who had chosen duty. It was the grief of missing every milestone, every first word, every first step, every birthday of a daughter she loved but could not keep. Diana's knowledge of what had happened, her full understanding of the consequences of that impossible choice, weighed on her every single day. She knew that somewhere in England, her daughter was growing up calling someone else Mummy. She knew that Charlotte would celebrate birthdays and Christmases, never knowing that her birth mother thought of her constantly. Diana knew all of this, and it broke her heart in ways the world never saw. The final entry in Diana's secret diary, written just days before her death, spoke of hope. She wrote that she had survived the worst thing a mother could endure, and if she could survive that, she could survive anything. She wrote about planning to find Charlotte when the time was right, about imagining a reunion that would heal them both. She wrote about believing that love, even love that had been forced into silence and separation, could never truly die. Camilla's role in the cover-up, Camilla Parker Bowles, now Queen Consort, has always been portrayed as the other woman in Charles and Diana's marriage, but her role in the Charlotte situation reveals a far more complex and troubling picture. Camilla knew about Diana's pregnancy and the subsequent adoption from the very beginning, making her not just a participant in Charles's romantic betrayal, but also a keeper of one of the most significant royal secrets in modern history. Charles told Camilla about Diana's pregnancy in September of 1982, just weeks after Diana herself had confirmed the news. At that time, Camilla was still married to Andrew Parker Bowles, though their relationship had long been complicated by her ongoing connection to Charles. According to sources close to the situation, Charles drove to Camilla's home in the middle of the night, devastated and seeking counsel from the woman he truly loved. He spent hours at her kitchen table, drinking whiskey and wrestling with what to do. Camilla's initial reaction was reportedly pragmatic rather than emotional. She understood immediately that Diana's pregnancy threatened everything Charles had worked for, every sacrifice he had made in the name of duty. But those close to Camilla at the time also observed something else in her response: an opportunity. If Charles could position himself as the magnanimous husband who stood by his wife despite her betrayal, he might eventually be free to pursue his relationship with Camilla more openly. The palace could not punish him for his relationship with her if he had demonstrated such remarkable forgiveness. It was Camilla who first suggested the adoption plan to Charles. During one of their late-night conversations at Bolahide Manor, she painted a picture of how it could work. The baby would be placed with a good family, Diana would be spared public humiliation, the monarchy would be protected, and Charles would emerge as a devoted husband who had weathered an impossible situation with grace. Camilla's critics would later call this manipulation, while her defenders insisted she was simply being practical about an impossible situation. Camilla accompanied Charles to some of his meetings with palace officials as they planned the logistics of the adoption. She was never officially part of these discussions, but she would wait in adjacent rooms, available for Charles to consult when he wanted support or guidance. Some staff members found her presence inappropriate and troubling, given that she was part of the reason Diana had sought comfort elsewhere in the first place. But Charles relied on Camilla's strength during this period, and no one was willing to challenge the future king's need for her support. The influence Camilla wielded over Charles's decision-making during this time cannot be overstated. Friends of Diana later claimed that Charles might have considered other options, perhaps even accepting Charlotte as his own daughter officially, if Camilla had encouraged him to do so. But Camilla understood that accepting another man's child would be seen as weakness, not strength, and that such weakness could jeopardize Charles's position. She reinforced his belief that the adoption was not just the best solution, but the only solution. Camilla also played a role in managing Diana's emotional state during and after the pregnancy. On at least 3 occasions, she sent messages to Diana through intermediaries, offering words of support and understanding. These messages infuriated Diana, who saw them as deeply hypocritical coming from the woman who had stolen her husband's heart. Diana reportedly tore up one of Camilla's letters without reading it fully, telling her sister that she did not need sympathy from the woman who had destroyed her marriage. The tension this created within the family was immense and long-lasting. When Diana learned that Camilla had known about the adoption plan from the beginning and had even helped shape it, whatever small chance existed for civility between the two women evaporated completely. Diana began to see Camilla not just as her romantic rival, but as someone who had actively participated in the most painful experience of her life. This added a new dimension to their already bitter antagonism. William and Harry, as they grew older and learned pieces of the truth, also developed complicated feelings about Camilla's role. William, in particular, struggled to accept Camilla after his mother's death, and the knowledge that she had been involved in the Charlotte situation only deepened his resistance. When Charles wanted to marry Camilla in 2005, William reportedly demanded a private conversation with her first, during which he asked her direct questions about what she had known and when she had known it. Camilla's responses during that conversation with William have never been fully disclosed, but those close to the situation say she took full responsibility for her advice to Charles. She explained that she had believed at the time that she was helping to protect Diana from public scandal, though she now understood how the situation had caused immeasurable pain. She told William that she had been young and foolish herself in 1982, unable to see beyond her own desires and fears. William's acceptance of Camilla after this conversation suggested that her honesty, however late it came, had made some impact. Within the palace, Camilla's knowledge of the secret gave her a certain power over the years. Staff members who might have questioned her presence or her influence knew that she held information that could destroy the monarchy if revealed. This created a dynamic where Camilla was both protected and resented, seen as essential to keeping Charles stable but also as a reminder of decades of deception. Some longtime palace employees refused to work directly with her, taking early retirement rather than serve someone they viewed as complicit in Diana's suffering. The tension extended to Camilla's own family as well. Her children, Tom and Laura, learned about the situation in the early 2000s when rumors began to circulate among aristocratic circles. They were shocked that their mother had kept such a secret for so long and worried about how the truth might affect their own reputations if it ever emerged. Tom reportedly had several heated arguments with Camilla about whether she should encourage Charles to reveal the truth sooner rather than later. Camilla's relationship with Queen Elizabeth was also affected by this secret. The Queen had never fully approved of Camilla, viewing her as the woman who had complicated her son's life and contributed to the disaster of his first marriage. The knowledge that Camilla had been involved in the adoption decision added another layer of disapproval. The Queen kept Camilla at arm's length for years, refusing to give her a formal role or title even as it became clear that Charles would never give her up. When Charles finally decided in 2025 to reveal the truth about Charlotte, Camilla supported his decision but also harbored deep anxiety about how she would be portrayed in the story. She knew that her role, however well-intentioned she believed it to be at the time, would be viewed harshly by many. She worked with palace communications staff to prepare for the inevitable backlash, though she insisted that Charles should not minimize her involvement in an attempt to protect her. In the aftermath of Charles's announcement, Camilla released her own statement through Clarence House. In it, she acknowledged that she had known about the situation from the beginning and had given advice that she now deeply regretted. She expressed sorrow for Diana's suffering and for the pain that Charlotte had experienced upon learning the truth. She stated that she had been a different person in 1982, unable to see beyond her own limited perspective, and that she had spent years trying to become someone worthy of the role she now held. Public reaction to Camilla's involvement was harsh and immediate. Social media exploded with criticism, with many calling for her to step down from her position as Queen Consort. Protests were organized outside Clarence House, with demonstrators carrying signs that read, "Camilla knew" and "Justice for Diana." Opinion polls showed that her favorability ratings, which had been slowly improving over the years, plummeted overnight. But there were also those who defended Camilla, arguing that she had been placed in an impossible position by her love for Charles and the demands of the institution. They pointed out that the ultimate decisions had been made by Charles and the palace establishment, not by Camilla. Some royal commentators noted that judging the actions of people in 1982 by the standards of 2025 was unfair, given how much society had changed in the intervening decades. Camilla's role in the cover-up remains one of the most controversial aspects of the entire Charlotte situation. She was not the primary decision-maker, but she was far from an innocent bystander. Her influence over Charles during this crucial period, her practical approach to Diana's crisis, and her decades of silence all contribute to a portrait of a woman who chose loyalty to the man she loved over compassion for his suffering wife. Whether history will judge her harshly or with understanding remains to be seen, but her involvement in this secret has forever complicated her legacy as queen consort. The succession crisis. The revelation of Charlotte Anne's existence has triggered the most significant constitutional question facing the British monarchy since the abdication crisis of 1936. While Charlotte is not Charles's biological daughter and therefore has no legal claim to the throne, the mere existence of this secret has raised profound questions about transparency, legitimacy, and the future stability of the royal succession. Prince William's position as heir to the throne remains legally secure, but the revelation has complicated his public image and his relationship with the institution he will one day lead. William learned the full truth about Charlotte only in June of 2025, when Charles summoned him to Balmoral for what the Prince of Wales initially believed would be a routine discussion about estate management. Instead, his father spent 3 hours explaining the events of 1982 and 83, showing William documents and photographs that proved everything he was saying. William's reaction was a mixture of shock, anger, and profound sadness for his mother. According to sources close to the prince, he spent several days processing the information before he could even speak to Catherine about it. When he finally did share the truth with his wife, they both wept for Diana and for the half-sister William had never known. William's first instinct was to meet Charlotte immediately, to establish a relationship with this woman who shared his mother's blood. But palace advisors cautioned against moving too quickly, concerned about how such a meeting might be perceived publicly. The revelation has also forced William to reconsider everything he thought he knew about his parents' marriage. He had always understood that his father's relationship with Camilla had driven his mother to unhappiness, but now he realized that the situation had been far more complex than he had been led to believe. This knowledge has created a new distance between William and Charles, with friends saying that the prince feels betrayed not just by the secret itself, but by the decades of lies that accompanied it. Prince Harry's position is perhaps even more complicated. Having already stepped back from royal duties and relocated to California with Meghan, Harry learned about Charlotte not from his father, but from news reports like everyone else. Charles had planned to tell Harry during a scheduled phone call, but the information leaked to the press before that conversation could take place. Harry was reportedly furious at being excluded from the initial disclosure, seeing it as yet another example of the palace prioritizing the institution over family relationships. Harry and Meghan released a statement through their Archewell Foundation expressing support for Charlotte and criticizing the palace for maintaining such a damaging secret for so long. Harry drew parallels between Charlotte's experience of being hidden away and his own feelings of being treated as the spare rather than the heir. Some commentators noted that Harry seemed to be using Charlotte's story to validate his own grievances against the royal family, while others felt his empathy was genuine and his criticisms valid. The legal implications for the line of succession are less dramatic than many initially feared, but still significant. Constitutional experts have confirmed that Charlotte has no claim to the throne because she is not Charles's biological daughter and was legally adopted by another family in 1983. The adoption, which was handled properly under British law, severed any legal connection Charlotte might have had to the royal family. However, the revelation has prompted calls for greater transparency about the line of succession and the rules that govern it. Parliament has begun preliminary discussions about whether new legislation is wanted to prevent similar situations in the future. Some MPs have suggested that all members of the royal family in direct line to the throne should be mandated to disclose certain personal information to a confidential parliamentary committee. Others argue that such measures would be invasive and unnecessary, given that the current situation arose from highly unusual circumstances unlikely to be repeated. The question of Charlotte's children has also emerged as a point of legal interest. Charlotte has 3 children, all now adults, who carry Diana's genetic legacy through their mother. While these individuals have no claim to titles or positions within the royal family, their existence raises questions about how far the royal bloodline extends and who should be considered part of the extended royal family. Some traditionalists argue that blood relationships matter less than legal ones, while others feel that Diana's grandchildren deserve some form of acknowledgement. The Church of England has also weighed in on the succession implications, given that the monarch serves as supreme governor of the Church. The Archbishop of Canterbury released a lengthy statement addressing the moral and theological dimensions of the situation. He emphasized forgiveness and reconciliation, while also acknowledging that institutions, including the Church, must be held accountable when they prioritize secrecy over truth. His statement was seen as a careful balancing act between supporting the monarchy and recognizing the harm caused by decades of deception. What this means for the future of the monarchy extends beyond legal questions to matters of public trust and institutional legitimacy. Opinion polls conducted in the weeks following Charles's announcement show that support for the monarchy has dropped to its lowest level in 50 years, with only 48% of Britons expressing support for keeping the royal family. Younger generations, in particular, have expressed anger at what they see as yet another example of one rule for the royals and another for everyone else. The revelation has also reignited Republican sentiment in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Political leaders in these regions have questioned why their constituents should continue to fund a monarchy that operates in secrecy and protects its own interests above all else. The Scottish National Party has called for a referendum on whether Scotland should maintain the monarch as head of state if the country achieves independence. In Wales, similar discussions have emerged, with some politicians arguing that the title Prince of Wales should be abolished entirely. The succession crisis triggered by Charlotte's revelation is not about who will be king or queen. Those questions remain settled. Instead, it is a crisis of confidence, a moment when the British people are asking themselves whether an institution built on tradition and secrecy can adapt to an age that demands transparency and accountability. How the royal family answers that question will determine whether the monarchy survives into the next century or becomes a relic of a bygone era. The truth finally revealed. King Charles's decision to reveal the truth about Charlotte Anne in October of 2025 was not, as he initially claimed, purely a matter of conscience and faith. While those factors certainly played a role, the reality was far more complex and driven by circumstances that had been building for months. The king found himself caught between the weight of his own mortality, the threat of exposure by outside forces, and a genuine desire to make amends for one of the greatest regrets of his life. Understanding why he chose this particular moment requires looking at the convergence of personal, political, and practical pressures that left him with no other choice. The king's health had been deteriorating throughout 2025, though the palace had been careful to present his condition as manageable and nothing to cause alarm. In reality, Charles had been diagnosed with a serious illness in March of that year, one that his doctors had told him would likely give him another 5 to 7 years if managed properly. The diagnosis forced Charles to confront his own mortality in a way he never had before. He began to think seriously about his legacy and about what truths would emerge after his death if he did not control them while he still could. Charles had multiple private conversations with the Archbishop of Canterbury throughout the spring and summer of 2025. These discussions went far beyond the usual relationship between monarch and religious leader. Charles spoke openly about his guilt over Charlotte, about the choices he had made in his youth, and about his fear that he would die without ever making things right. The Archbishop encouraged Charles to consider confession not as a religious obligation, but as a path to genuine healing for everyone involved, including Charlotte herself. But the catalyst that ultimately forced Charles's hand was the discovery that a journalist had obtained documents proving Charlotte's existence. In August of 2025, Palace Security Services learned that an investigative reporter had somehow accessed sealed adoption records from the 1980s. The journalist had not yet published anything, but Palace officials knew it was only a matter of time. Charles faced a choice: let the story be told by someone else, or tell it himself on his own terms. The decision, when it came down to it, was not really a decision at all. Charles spent weeks preparing for the announcement, working with a small team of advisors to craft his statement and anticipate every possible reaction. He insisted on telling William and Catherine first, despite the painful conversation he knew it would be. He wanted to tell Harry in person as well, but his younger son's schedule and the geographical distance made that impossible within the time frame they had. Charles has privately expressed deep regret about how Harry learned the news, understanding that it has further damaged their already fragile relationship. The public's reaction to the news has been unprecedented in its intensity and scope. Within hours of the first reports breaking, social media platforms were overwhelmed with commentary, speculation, and debate. The hashtags related to Charlotte and Diana trended worldwide for days. News networks devoted entire programs to analyzing every aspect of the story, bringing in experts on royal history, adoption law, and family psychology. The story dominated headlines not just in Britain but across the Commonwealth and around the world. Public opinion has been deeply divided. One segment of the population has expressed sympathy for Charles, viewing him as a young man who made difficult choices under impossible circumstances. These defenders point out that he was only 34 years old in 1982, under enormous pressure from his family and the institution, and genuinely trying to protect both Diana and the monarchy. They argue that judging his actions by contemporary standards ignores the very different social context of the early 1980s. But a larger portion of the public has reacted with anger and disgust. Many see Charles's actions as unforgivable, particularly his role in forcing Diana to give up her baby. These critics argue that Charles prioritized the monarchy's image over his wife's well-being and a child's right to know her mother. They point out that Charles's relationship with Camilla was the root cause of Diana's unhappiness, and that his moral authority to judge Diana's brief relationship was non-existent. Social media has been filled with calls for Charles to abdicate in favor of William. Diana's legacy has experienced a remarkable resurgence in the wake of these revelations. Memorials and tributes to the late princess have appeared spontaneously outside Kensington Palace, Buckingham Palace, and at the site of her grave at Althorpe. Many of the mourners are young people who were not even born when Diana passed away, but who have been moved by the story of her forced separation from Charlotte. Diana is being recast in public memory, not just as a humanitarian and style icon, but as a victim of an institution that valued its own preservation above all else. Charlotte herself has become the focus of intense media attention, though she has remained largely silent since learning the truth. She released one brief statement through a lawyer, saying that she wanted time to process this information and requesting privacy for herself and her family. Paparazzi have camped outside her Norfolk home, and tabloids have offered substantial sums for exclusive interviews. So far, Charlotte has refused all media requests, though sources close to her suggest that she may eventually share her story when she feels ready. The question of what happens next for the royal family is one that keeps palace advisors awake at night. William and Charles meet regularly, but their conversations are reportedly tense and formal. Harry has not spoken to his father since the news broke and has given no indication that he plans to in the near future. Catherine has taken on the role of family mediator, trying to maintain relationships between various family members while also protecting her own children from the fallout. Plans are underway for Charlotte to meet her half-brothers, though the timing remains uncertain. William has expressed a strong desire to establish a relationship with Charlotte and to ensure that she feels welcomed into the family if she wishes. Harry has sent messages through intermediaries expressing similar sentiments, but Charlotte herself has been cautious, understandably overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of her entire identity, and uncertain whether she wants to become part of a family that chose to give her away. The monarchy's future hangs in a balance it has not experienced since the death of Diana in 1997. Charles's decision to reveal the truth about Charlotte may have been the right moral choice, but it has also exposed the institution's vulnerabilities in ways that critics can exploit. Republican movements across the Commonwealth have seized on the scandal as proof that hereditary monarchy is fundamentally incompatible with modern values of honesty and accountability. Yet there are also signs that the monarchy might survive this crisis as it has survived so many others. The British people have a complicated relationship with their royal family, capable of harsh criticism one moment and fierce loyalty the next. William and Catherine's popularity remains strong, and many see them as representing a more modern, transparent version of royalty that could restore public faith. The question is whether the damage caused by Charlotte's revelation can be contained before it becomes irreparable. In the end, Charles's decision to speak now was both courageous and self-serving, honest and calculating, redemptive and destructive. It was the act of a man trying to make peace with his past before time runs out, but also the desperate move of a king trying to control a narrative that was about to spiral beyond his control. History will judge whether he made the right choice, but for now, the royal family must simply try to survive the storm that this truth has unleashed.